Welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor John Ward and will be chairing the Planning Committee meeting today. Here's Vice Chairman Karen Vincent, Helen Mellors, and our presenting officer, Glenn Bagwell. Thank you. Right, the Vice Chairman will now read out the fire safety notice.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies, and welcome. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, if I can get my words out. Slow down. We are not expecting a fire drill today, so if the fire alarm sounds, we will need to evacuate the building. There are 2 fire exits from this room. One is through the double doors in which you came in, and the other is to the door to the right of the stage, which I'm just pointing to, and that leads to an external fire escape. Please note that you should not use the lift in the event of a fire. In the event of the evacuation, we will meet to the left of the driveway at the main entrance to Thorpe Lodge. Many thanks.
This meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record the meeting, please can you identify yourselves now? No? Thank you. Please can you all ensure that mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone while the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks at various times throughout the meeting. Councillor Leggett, are you paying attention, please? If you must use your mobile phone, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate that this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. So if we could have declarations of interest, please. Yes, Councillor Brownland.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I can just read this out, because it makes it a little bit easier for me. Regarding item 4 on today's agenda, first of all, the application is in my ward, parish, and by default, my home village. Foremost, as shown in our papers today, I lodged the application for retrospective planning permission. That was done in my capacity as a director of the White Horse Development Trust, CIC, Upton White Horse at the time. Since lodging the application, I've ceased to be a director of the CIC. However, I remain a shareholder in the company, as does my wife, so I continue to have a pecuniary interest in the application presented to you today. For those reasons, I consider it prudent that I neither participate in discussion concerning the application nor register a vote. So with your agreement, Chair, I will leave the chamber prior to consideration of item 4 to avoid any impropriety by way of perceived influence on committee members resulting from my continued presence during their deliberations. And I request I be invited back into the chamber following the conclusion of that item for the rest of our agenda.
Yes, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman. It's reference item 3 on our agenda, 2020-1647 Catton House. This application is in my ward in Old Catton, and I was at a parish council meeting on Monday evening where this matter was discussed, but I took no part in that debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding item 3, 2020-1647 Catton House, that is also in my ward, and I have attended meetings and listened, but I have not made any decisions on this, so I have declare a non-pecuniary interest, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Could I just ask advice for someone who sat in the pods at the White Horse a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago? Do I need to declare an interest?
No. I mean, it's always good to obviously report any obviously occurrences on the site, but that wouldn't prevent you from continuing on the meeting.
I was there 2 years ago.
Well, we should all declare that we know Councillor Brennan. Yes. Thank you. Right, apologies for absence, please.
Chairman, we have no apologies.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Full too.
To consider the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of May for accuracy.
Well, I move they be signed as a true record, Chairman.
All happy? Okay. Sign those as true record. Thank you. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? Yes, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very small typo, just for clarity. Page sorry. Page 6, application 2021-2175. It's got Brundle spelt with an E, whereas of course it should be Brund with an A, just for
Okay.
clarity.
Okay,
That's
thank you
all.
very much.
Not being facetious in any way, Chair.
Sorry, can I just add to that as well, Chairman? Councillor Lamming was actually present for that item at the meeting and spoke, so her name needs to be added to the list of
Yes.
members speaking. So I'll make that correction as well.
Okay, thank
On
you.
this, and that was the same application. Thank you.
All right, nothing else on the minutes. Thank you. We come to the applications, page 10. And the first one is the Acle Garden Machinery Centre, Norwich Road, Acle.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. This application is at Acle Garden Machinery Centre on Norwich Road in Acle. Comprises 3 elements: the raising of the land and the use of that land as part of the business premises, the erection of an additional warehouse to the rear, and the provision of an additional hard surface. To zoom in on that at all, can you see that okay? Far from the screens. Okay, right. So this is on the southwest edge of Acle, highlighted in the red circle just there. You've got the slip road into the village from the A47 on the left-hand side of the screen, for new level development being built in that kind of sandy area just off the centre of the screen. In closer views, this was the site. I imagine this was taken about 18 months ago from Google Maps. Again, it just shows the site in closer quarters, where you've got the roundabout on the left-hand side of the screen, which is from the slip road of the A47, telephone exchange through which a new access road is being built to the level development on the northern side of Acle. Having said that, there is a general policy presumption inside and out of settlement limit, no significant adverse impacts. So in general terms, the principle of development is acceptable here. However, to draw out some of the issues that are highlighted in the report, land on the street scene, the impact of the wet, the stability of the raised land, contamination, impact of vehicular movements associated with the development on highway safety, issues as well. So we are showing the extent of the site. We've got the red line goes along Norwich Road and then curves around the rear of the site in a sort of W shape before edging round again like so. We've got the annotations here showing the nature of the proposal. So we've got the warehouse in red in the centre of the screen, the raised land hatched in purple, and we've got the proposed landscaping with the curly green line along the front and part of the western boundary as well. In terms of the view of the site, is a panoramic view of the site taken from just outside the telephone exchange. So you've got the existing premises, commercial premises, these 2 units here. The existing warehouse, the big black blob in the middle, and then the raised land on the right-hand side from the centre. See, it's quite open at present. And this is where the proposed landscaping is going to be along the front. And you can see that levels are level with a footpath as well. In terms of the things being proposed, we've got the additional hard standing, which has already been provided along the frontage. We've got an existing drainage channel, which comes to about here. And that's going to be extended further into the site. And this drains into an existing soakaway. At the rear of the site, where we have the proposed warehouse storage building, some hard standing leading to that proposed, with a drainage channel on the edge of that, which will lead into a pipe into the soakaway in this area just here. And then we've got some, I suppose it's grasscrete in old terminology, parking spaces being proposed just on the right-hand side of the screen, so permeable paving. A house building now. It's a little bit dark, but it's going in this area just here. In closer views, you can see it's going to relate to what's already there, similar in appearance. So we'll just go back. So picture that in your mind. And then we're going to go round the building. It's going to sit just about 65 centimetres behind this building here. So you'll see it in the context of other buildings on site. And it's our view that it won't have a significant impact on the character and appearance of the area. In terms of looking at the levels, this is just reminding you the extent of the area that's been raised by a further 2.25 metres from what was previously approved. So it's now level with this area here, which was previously granted planning permission to be raised to the level it is at the moment. It doesn't read like an artificial feature to me, and on that basis, I think that the impact on the character and appearance of the area is acceptable. Any potential impacts can be further mitigated by the landscaping that's proposed to be provided along the front and the side boundary. And we're looking to secure that by condition. And you can see that the land is starting to become colonised, so it's relatively stable. And when I walked around it last week, and when the case officer has walked around it previously, there was pretty compact, and there was no indication that it was about to as it were. And here we are, just kind of walking around the edge of the site, showing, again, the embankments are colonised, appear relatively stable. The soil has come from the Norwich Road development on the northern side. It's been validated as being clean soil by our environmental health officers, and that was part of a discharge of condition application, which is referred to in your papers. So again, just kind of walking around the site. This is the southern boundary. And this, so the side closest to the roundabout. In terms of drainage, here's the existing drain that's to be extended. So this is next to the shop premises, and this is going to be extended across the frontage, as we can see. And as we get into some of the photos, the existing drain is just hiding behind here at the moment, but will extend into the site, and as I said, discharge to a soakaway that has already been tested for suitability for infiltration, sort of sand and gravel from the site on the opposite side of the road, which is discussed in the report, and about delivery out that there are 3 HGV movements a week and 1 daily sort of sprinter parcel force type van, which brings stuff to and from the premises. There is no space within the site to enable an HGV to turn and to enter and exit, to exit within a forward gear. And at present, HGVs park in about this area here, about 20 minutes, and then it disappears off again. There's not much really we can do about it from a planning perspective. If there is an issue in terms of the enforceability of that with them obstructing any part of the highway, that's a matter for Norfolk Police. However, given that this is outside of our control and could occur already without us being able to do anything about it, our view is that the impact on highway safety in the absence of a highway objection is not sufficient grounds on which to refuse the application. So on the whole, given the general presumption in favour of business development inside and outside of development boundaries, the acceptable impacts on the street scene of all elements of the application, the acceptability in terms of the drainage elements and highway safety and contamination, in the round, we consider this to be an acceptable form of development, and subject to the conditions set out in your report, the officer recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for the officer, please? No? Yes.
I just have one question that may have been answered. In 411, the last sentence, it is considered the business has outgrown the premises no longer suitable there. But in 410, it said, if infiltration is not viable and surface water discharge is proposed, then a drainage consent would be required. Did you cover that? I wasn't quite sure whether that had been done, and if so, do they require the drainage consent?
There has been infiltration testing,
has
and
been.
that's been independently verified and deemed to be acceptable. So we no longer need to pursue that.
Doesn't require it. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for the officer? No, then we'll go to public speaking. If Mr. Dixon would like to take a seat here, please. And you have 5 minutes, Mr. Dixon, starting from now.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak on behalf of my client, Ken Petley. I'll try to be brief. We're pleased to note that the recommendation is to approve, and thanks to Mr. Baum for all his help and advice during the course of the application. This successful local business presently employs 8 people, and this would be increased by a further 3 if the warehouse goes ahead. The principle of raising the land has previously been accepted, and it is not acknowledged that the warehouse will not impact on the landscape character of the marshes. With regard to stability, the report also acknowledges that it has a 45-degree slope, and therefore the bank is stable. Mr. Petley is content to accept planning conditions requiring further boundary treatment and planting, as referred to at para 513 of your report, ensuring that the site is made secure. Turning to noise, the report acknowledges that this will not be exacerbated by the construction of the warehouse. Bearing in mind that the hours of operation, it is also acknowledges that the scale of the warehouse will not impact on the amenity of residential properties, which are buffered by the existing structures on the site and the main road in between. And so it accords with planning policy as referred to at para 516. Furthermore, the hours of operation are restricted 9 to 5 on Mondays to Fridays and 9 to 12 on Saturdays, so there's no real impact over the weekends. Next, with regard to ecology, this has been considered robustly over time, and taking into account the response from Natural England and others, it's concluded that there will be no ecological harm, as also confirmed in the report, and therefore it's compliant with policy. In addition, highway safety is not compromised, and surface water drainage and infiltration concerns have been addressed. The data provided comply with national and local planning policies. Finally, all these matters and other concerns raised have been considered by Mr. Baum and his colleagues, and have understandably, they have recommended approval in accordance with planning policy as referred to at para 5.38. With all the above in mind, we would request that the committee accepts the recommendation and grants consent with appropriate conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any councillors have a question for Mr. Dixon, please? No, thank you. You may resume your seat. Thank you. And Councillor Hempsall, would you like to take a seat? And you have 5 minutes starting now. Thank you. No, it's on now.
It's on now, right? Okay. This has been my my thing. Right. So, good morning, Chairman. Good morning, committee. I'm here because when this application first landed on my desk, I did call it in. Just so you know, my inbox has never, in all of my time as a councillor, been as busy and upset with complaints and issues raised than this particular application. I have worked, so I call this application in if it was due for approval because, and I'll outline briefly, there have been many, and I know this isn't a planning consideration, there have been many retrospective elements to this application. And the reason I wanted it called in is to ensure that each and every one of those was addressed before this came to committee. I'm pleased to say that those have been addressed, but it's not been easy. You'll know that raising the ground included importing of soil from a different site. Licenses for that, obtaining those licenses from the applicant was akin to pulling teeth. There are other retrospective elements to this. Again, it's been really difficult. I've been on the phone to the Internal Drainage Board, to our enforcement team, to the waste management people at Norfolk County Council to ensure that this application finally takes a shape that remains acceptable. in planning terms, it is true. All the elements have been ticked off. The impact has been mitigated on the street scene. Highways have no objections. However, there are other elements to do with this application, which include, for example, the lorries are unloaded by forklifts, which those of you who understand health and safety, those forklifts all have reversing alarms and beeps. So for 20 minutes or however long it takes to unload these lorries, there is incessant noise that is associated with these forklifts unloading and loading, which in itself is part of the operation. But what I want to come to is that I really love that this business is in my village. It's been an absolute godsend over the pandemic when everybody was at home looking after their gardens. You know, Acre Garden Machinery were there supplying and delivering to local residents, you know, far and wide. However, I feel that this amazingly successful business has reached the point where it can't really expand on the site anymore. It is in a residential area. It is close to the main drain through Acle, which decants into a protected woodland and a site of special scientific interest further down the line. It is getting busier. I don't know how we do this by condition. I know that everything has to be applied for moving forward. However, because the applications come in a retrospective form, it's difficult to regularise, especially with a council like ours, where the officers are super cooperative and really try and help applicants regularise issues on their, you know, on their land, on their application sites. It's difficult to draw that line in the sand. But for the sake of the residents, for the sake of actually, this is a place which is quite sensitive in terms of, you know, biodiversity and the effect on the drain. If that drain gets blocked, my village gets flooded. End of. You know, if that drain gets contaminated, badly contaminated, it affects a site of special scientific interest further down the line. It matters. It actually matters. So, you know, it's impossible to say to somebody, oh, can you please shush the forklift trucks? It would not be safe to do so. But operating this site moving forward in a collaborative, neighbourly fashion, I feel is important, because at the moment the relationships have broken down between many of the residents, the business and the parish council. So in your considerations, I just wanted to put it on the record that, yes, I agree that all planning matters have been discharged and this is fit for approval. I just want to put it on record for my residents, for the parish council and for the business itself, that it's important that we find a better way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Councillor Hempsall? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Over to you, councillors, then.
I'll move the officer's recommendation and
Okay, any comment? Yes, Councillor Karimi.
I'm slightly concerned if this goes ahead, we're going to have more HGV parking on the path, unloading. Is that blocking that path for those 20 minutes while they're unloading?
Oh, sorry, excuse me. My understanding is that there have been incidents of that in the past, yeah. But as I said in my presentation, that's a matter for Norfolk Police and for the management on the site as well to deal with.
Regarding safety of the public.
That's been discussed with Norfolk County Council as Highway Authority, because it's been a running theme throughout the application. Ultimately, it's reviewed the information that's being provided as part of that and has decided not to object to the application. And we've taken that on board in our recommendation.
Okay, any further comments?
Just clarify
Yes.
something. Can I just clarify? In the recommendation, it says authorise. Actually, it is actually to approve because there are no outstanding matters, so it's not to authorise.
Okay, any further comments from anybody? Well, it's proposed by Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Fisher, that we approve as per officer's recommendation. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, the next item, which starts on page 27 on your papers. Yeah. 2022-0393 Honningham Thorpe Farm. Installation of temporary cable and associated works. Over to you, Glenn, again. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chairman. Sorry, I'm having microphone trouble. Okay, installation of a temporary cable and associated works at Honningham Thorpe Farm in Honningham. You'll be aware from the application, or sorry, from the committee report, that this is associated with an application that South Norfolk Council is currently dealing with for a 30 megawatt solar farm just to the west of Colton. So you would have seen this in the presentation that was forwarded on, and this is just trying to show you how it all knits together. So on the left-hand side, we've got the proposed solar farm, which is due to go to South Norfolk's Planning Development Management Committee in a couple of weeks' time. So this is in Colton, or just to the west of Colton. We've got the approximate boundaries of the Food Enterprise Park, which is within our district. And then we've got the substation, which is currently under construction, roughly where the arrow is on the right-hand side of the screen. So the cable will run, I'm just going to draw an arc, or follow an arc with a cursor, even though the route is not the route that I will trace. We'll see that later on. But the cable will more or less follow this route to the substation. The nature of the district council boundaries is such that it crisscrosses both boundaries of South Norfolk and Broadland. Just over 2 kilometres of the cable route falls within Broadland, hence the application and why we're sat here today. So if I take that layer off, it just gives you an impression of the site as predominantly rural. Food Enterprise Park, which is, there's a local development order in place there for agricultural and food-based businesses. It's developing out at the moment, and we'll see in a couple of the photos. We've got the Food Innovation Centre, which is a Broadland initiative in the southwest corner. We've got the vertical farm, which you might have seen some stuff about and heard about, under construction in roughly this area here. And over the coming years, the Food Enterprise Park will be developed out for those types of businesses. Primarily, the solar farm and the cable associated with it are looking to provide power for the Food Enterprise Park. And should any excess power be available, that may feed into the local grid as well. So I just want to give you a wider picture of, in addition to what I've already said about what's being proposed. So this is the extent of the solar farm and the first part of the cable, which is entirely within the South Norfolk district. And this yellow disc just here shows at the point at which it enters into the Broadland district. So this, up to this point here, just off the centre of the screen, is the route of the cable within Broadland. So from the bottom left, round the back of Honningham Thorpe Farm, mostly within land, well, almost entirely within land owned by the farm, to the point at which it exits Broadland into South Norfolk. And you can see it's a rather jaggedy line with a boundary between both districts. But generally, pretty much anything to the north of this road and to the west of this green line is within Broadland. I think I've said enough on the context of the application, so forgive me if I just scoot on to the next slide. So the key considerations for this one: the principle of development, impact on the character and appearance of the area, heritage issues, impact on residents, highway safety, trees, ecology, and economic development. I've already given a bit of a spiel on the economic element of it. It's proposed to be provided in support of the Food Enterprise Park. Policy GC5 of the DMDPD is generally supportive of renewable energy and associated infrastructure, of which this is. So in principle, the development is acceptable, subject to considering those normal planning matters. So what we have here is a cross-section of the trench, which is about 70 centimetres wide and about 1 metre deep. As it enters the district from the junction of Norwich Road and I think it's High House Road or High House Lane on the south, goes through a hedgerow and around a lake within the grounds of Honningham Thorpe Farm. And if you just follow this yellow line on some of the other slides, which may or may not be visible to you, I hope it is quite clear on the screens, but this is the yellowy green line that we're looking at. So again, just following the route, follow the cursor. So it cuts in here, goes around this bank of trees under the lake, and then if you can around the pond or the lake, through this tree belt and up adjacent to the tree belt at the top of the screen. So it's going to cut through this hedgerow about there, give or take the width of a cursor. It'll come round here. This is me looking back towards the road. So this is just, you can just see the fronted hedgerow here. Come through, round here. This is the tree belt just here. And the purpose of this picture was to show that the tree cover is quite dense towards me as I've taken this photo. Across the road, so this is all within the ownership of Honningham Thorpe Farm. Across the road, just here, you can just about make out a yellow line that I've put on. Then as I pivot round along here, and then it comes round this bend. I couldn't take any photos down there because there are lots of activity going on a way bridge, so I had to be careful. And then along this verge, this is further up. So this is me looking back from here. So I'm about halfway up the drive towards the Food Enterprise Park through this verge here. Again, I've turned round, and this is me looking towards the Food Enterprise Park. So following that route there, and then as we get to the edge of the boundary of Honningham Thorpe Farm where it meets the highway, again, this is within the ownership of Honningham Thorpe Farm. Going to be provided within the verge just here. We'll cross Blind Lane and then zigzag. This is the Food Innovation Centre just in the background here. And we'll go behind this hedgerow just there, all the way along to the boundary with South Norfolk. I was unable to take any photos within the site because there's quite a bit of construction activity going on, and frankly, all you would have seen is a hedge. So it's just more of the same, really, going on towards the east and towards the entrance and exit for the Food Enterprise Park. So the line, if I just trace the cursor, behind the hedge, behind the trees, to the front of the condomentum. It's just giving you an indication of what the hedge looks like at the moment from the front. Across the access into the Food Enterprise Park and out of Broadland through into South Norfolk. Now, in terms of the impacts, it's underground, so it's very unlikely to have an impact on neighbouring properties. Maybe some disruption while some works goes on in the public highway, but that's likely to be relatively short-lived. We're also looking at the impact on I think I've already said about that, the impact on the character of the area, again, underground. So in terms of trees, clearly where it's going through that tree belt and through the hedge at the beginning of the route, there will be a significant tree cover within the surrounding area, and the ability for that to be relatively unaffected in terms of the contribution that those tree belts make to the character of the area. my view is that our board, there's some recommendations that have been made in terms of ecology and keeping a watching brief in terms of trenches. Should anything reptilian fall within those trenches and being able to get out. And it will help to support the economic development of the food enterprise park. Given the absence of significant harms, the presumption in favour of supporting renewable energy infrastructure and the economic benefits associated with this, subject to the conditions in the report, the officer recommendation is to approve, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for the officer? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. You did touch on the tree belt. I mean, a trench in my language, roughly 2'6" by 3 foot, is quite a significant trench to drive through the middle of what is a tree belt. I know you make the point that that probably wouldn't impact on the visibility aspect, but roughly how many trees will be lost, and is there an alternative route?
No trees within the Broadland area are proposed for removal. A number of routes were considered as part of the initial scoping. There was some variation, I think it was around this area here, but if I just go through some of them. So the trench is, like I said, about 7 centimetres wide, which is 2 foot, I guess, a little over. Let's see if I can zoom in. So if we look at the areas that are where the trees are, so we've got the hedge to the front, and then we've got this area here, and I showed the picture at ground level, showing the relative absence of density, I suppose, at ground level, and then it's going to skirt along the right-hand side of this tree belt, the southern side of this tree belt, and into the verges thereafter. So those areas of tree belt, and I think if I go back to one of the other photos, there is some amount of space there within that verge for the trench to be provided. It's a little bit tighter there, but one thing to bear in mind, and one thing that's an overgrown area, and actually when you walk along there is more space to the between the sort of the base of the trees to where the cable is going to be provided. So there is quite an amount of space there.
Okay, we finished. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Karimi.
So are you confident that none of those tree roots will be disturbed then?
I think if there are routes to be affected, well, first of all, the arboricultural impact assessment assesses that there will be no significant impacts on the trees. That's not to say there will be no impacts on the trees, but no significant impacts on the trees that will affect their future health and viability.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, page 28, 1.3. Construction solar farm and the provision of the cable will take between 30 to 40 weeks. Have they broken this down in terms of how long it will take to install the cable as that element, and how long it would take to build the solar farm? We're going to do the things simultaneously, and therefore we've got a 30 to 40 week period. Has it been broken down at all? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. The information that we have is that it's 30 to 40 weeks as an end-to-end time. We don't have the information as to which bit's going to take which length of time, but do bear in mind that almost within the Broadland section, the entirety, with the exception where it crosses the public highway, most of this route is entirely within the ownership of Honningham Thorpe Farm.
Any further questions for the officer? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Glenn, for the presentation. Can I just check my understanding? If we don't approve this, will there be a power supply? My understanding there'll be a power supply for the council's Food Enterprise Centre and the vertical farm.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, this application has come forward to support the development of the Food Enterprise Park. There is not enough power supply as it stands without this to support the power and energy requirements for the Food Enterprise Park.
Yes, Councillor Folger. No. Any further questions for the officer? No. Thank you. Would Mr. Willis like to come forward then, please? And you have 5 minutes, Mr. Willis.
Thanks very much, and good morning, Chairman and Councillors. Clark Willis, I'm a Director of the Food Enterprise Park. Just a bit of background to this. Councillor Vincent did mention it. When we built the Food Enterprise Park, the LDO, which is in the Broadland area, the only electricity that's available at Easton is 3.7 meg. So there is no further electricity available on that side of Easton. So we brought forward, I guess, two elements. One was approved by South Norfolk back in December, which was what's called a 132 connection, direct from the pylon on Easton College through to that substation, which is currently being built, and we're looking to energise that this August. That will bring grid power. It will bring grid power at today's grid prices, which are going to be a challenge. As you can well imagine, if you look at where we are right now, we've got Condimentum with about 1 meg. We've got the Food Innovation Centre, which initially is 3/4 megabyte, but has a requirement potentially up to 2 meg. And the vertical farm for Fisher Farms, which is estimated at 4 megawatts. So add those together, and yes, we will have grid power to deal with it. The challenge that we've got is that the vertical farm would find it very difficult to operate at the level of today's prices in terms of its sustainability. It would work very well around about 10 pence a unit. We're well over 20 pence a unit. So the whole idea of this is that we have one vertical farm. There are actually potentially 3 more, 2 of them on the LDO for Broadland, and one we're bringing forward the LDO on the rest of the land for the Food Innovation Centre. So the plan with this is it's behind the grid, and therefore we are going to be able to put a power purchase agreement, a PPA, in place for a long period at stable electricity prices. The cable route is long. It's pretty much 100% through what you and I would call open ground. But it's in an area that's very the solar farm very well shaded, and I think the planning officer will tell you that actually he's never seen a application so easy in terms of I guess the concern that people have got for that solar farm. It is well shaded, and that's why it was chosen. So I'm here really to answer any questions there are. This is about food security, and it's about energy security, and this is long-term economic development for Norfolk.
Okay, thank you. Do any councillors have questions for Mr. Willis, please? No? If you'd like to resume your seat then, Mr. Willis, thank you. Right, over to you, councillors. Councillor Riley.
Yeah, I also noticed on this, Chair, that on page 30, excuse me, Highways Consideration Authority, 29 going on to 32. There's a number of things in there. The prior to commencement of any works, construction traffic management plan assessment will be incorporated. adequate provision for addressing any abnormal wear on the highways. So I can see that in there. And I'd just like to say that the actual primary application in terms of the land and its use and agriculture and the rest of it isn't for us to determine. What we're talking about is the trench here for our part. And therefore I would move that we approve, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Folger. Oh. Councillor Fisher, could you just turn that microphone off, please? Could you turn that microphone off? Oh, it's all right, Councillor Leggett's going.
I've had the opportunity of visiting this site on a couple of occasions, and can only stress the strategic importance of this Food Enterprise Centre as far as Broadland is concerned. It's a major development, not only for Broadland but for Norfolk, and I'm pleased to second the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment, Councillor Vincent?
I was actually going to echo what Roger has said, or Councillor Folger, about the importance of this site to Broadland and the economic growth of the area. So it's supporting renewable energy. We've heard the impact in terms of ecology and limited impact on the tree belt. So I think it's a very positive application and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Leggett?
And thank you, Chairman. And just to add to that, what I think is so sound about this is that instead of local produce being carted miles away and being packed and then coming back, it's going to be done locally, as I understand it. That may not be a complete planning issue, but to me it was very important, and I certainly support it, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? No. Well, it's proposed by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Folger, that we approve as per officer's recommendation. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Now, does anybody need or want a 5-minute comfort break? No. Yes? Okay, we'll have a 5-minute comfort break now. Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you again, Chair. So an application for a multi-purpose outbuilding at Catton House and 4 Park Close in Old Catton. We've had further comments from Old Catton Parish Council on this, and they've confirmed that they no longer object to the application. So let's jump into the presentation then. On the left-hand side, we've got the site just showing where it sits in relation to its surroundings. It's pretty much in the middle of the screen. You've got Catton Park to the south, and those of you that know the area, you've got Old Catton Junior School just almost on the opposite side of the road, and then the Wreck at Old Catton, this big area here. And you may be aware of the Deer Meadow just on the right-hand side of the screen here. The site is within the settlement limit that's been defined for Old Catton, also within the conservation area. So in terms of the key considerations, perhaps the key most consideration is whether you think this is an appropriate addition to the street scene and is suitable in terms of how it sits in the conservation area. In other words, does it preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area? We've also got impact on neighbouring properties to consider as well. So just on the right-hand side, we've got the existing property just there, which is a 2-storey dwelling. And then the outbuilding is proposed to go in this position here. This is a block plan showing the building in relation to what's on site. There's a better tree plan later on towards the end of the presentation, and we'll have a look at that then. But there are trees that are subject to a tree preservation order within the property. Church Road, scooting along diagonally at the top of the slide, I beg your pardon. The site is accessed from Church Lane about like this, if you just follow the cursor. And in terms of what's being proposed, it's a 2-storey building with a basement swimming pool and garaging for the applicant's car and motorbike collection, with a games room upstairs. And we'll see that in some of the other slides. So this elevation here faces within the plot. And this is what you'll see from in 2 dimensions from Church Street. So this is the north elevation. Side elevations largely mirror each other. And then at some point, we're going to go on a journey down Church Street. So you can try and imagine the building as you're going up and down it. And this is just confirming the floor plan. So we've got a swimming pool at basement level, garaging just here with a kind of an atrium going up to the games room at first floor level where the dormers are. Right, so let's go for a walk down Church Street. This is the applicant's property, just there. Access just on the left-hand side. This is a wall, an old estate wall that fronts Church Street. So if you just imagine it being about there, but it'll become clearer as we go further on. So we're going from the Spixworth Road side to the St Faith's Road side, and the church is further along the street. So the building is going to sit about there. This is a yew tree close to the front boundary, and it'll sit before the yew tree just there. And again, as we go closer, so you imagine in that gap just here. So we're starting to turn back on ourselves now. In terms of trying to get your bearings, the building's going to be 6.5 meters high. The fork in this tree is about 5.9 meters high. So it's going to sit about 60 centimeters, 2 foot more or less in old money, above that fork. So you just imagine it in that area there. As part of the application, there's been a series of amendments as part of the application. Senior Design and Heritage Officer has been consulted as part of the application. His comments are available to read in the report. He doesn't object to the application. And then, sorry, this is just, again, coming further back down Church Street. So this is the view you would see from the western side. So you wouldn't see it, essentially, given the sinuous nature of the road in that location. So it's more visible in closer quarters than from the eastern side. So within the grounds of the property itself, again, more or less in that area there, we've got some railway sleepers, which we'll see shortly, which give a good indication of where it's going to be, just here. Applicant's property just off screen there. And here we are on the tree protection plan. So as I said, a number of trees on the site are subject to a tree preservation order. In terms of explaining this diagram in a bit more detail, we've got the root protection areas, which are the larger green circles, as shown there. So if I zoom in, there's no encroachment of the building into this tree just here. Relatively modest bit of encroachment just there. What this checker area is ground protection. So it doesn't indicate a patio or anything like that. It's the ground protection measures that will be employed during the construction process. And then the green line indicates protective fencing that's to be provided during the construction process as well. It's being discussed with the council's tree officer and subject to the condition that the development should take place in accordance with the arboricultural impact assessment. She doesn't object to the application. The senior conservation and design officer doesn't object to the application and considers it to be a suitable feature within the street scene. And for the reasons set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for the officer, please? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you. You've got your light on.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Glenn, for the presentation. Just got a couple of questions, if I may, just to ensure I fully understand the proposals. The presentations that were shared are very much of a sketch, and some of the dimensions I don't feel are particularly clear. I don't know if you just talked about so if you're able to help with the interpretation of those, that would be very beneficial, I feel. In terms of the height of the building above the boundary wall, could you just remind me what that was? I noted 6.5 metres, but also the length of the building as well would be helpful to know, please. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to say forgive me if I forget all of the elements to your question. You'll have to remind me for those bits that I've missed. So the height of the building is 6.5 metres to the ridge. The width of it, side to side, 12.5 metres. The height of the wall is 3 metres. So the building will project above the wall by 3.5 metres.
Thank you. And my other question was the length of the building. So the length of the building will be along that historic wall.
12.5 metres.
Oh, 12.5 metres, sorry. Thank you. That was one question. Just to pick up on I'm speaking with my member champion for heritage for Broadland hat on, and I know it was referenced that it's within the conservation area, and that is an historic estate wall. So it's understanding the visible impact of that building within that area, and the overlooking. There's about 8 houses which will look across the road towards it, is my understanding. Is that correct?
In terms of the wall, yes, it is a historic estate wall. I think if members were, although this isn't on the report, I think if members were minded to approve the application, I think what I would want to see is a condition that perhaps requires that wall to be retained, because it is an important feature within the street scene and within the conservation area. So we'd want that to be preserved. In terms of overlooking, clearly there are residential properties opposite, and I think this is discussed in it's discussed in the report, but the gist of the report was that appreciate it'll be visible and that there's roof lights being proposed in the building. However, in view of the level of separation and the presence of the road, Church Street, in between, it was considered that the intervening road and the distance meant there were insufficient grounds on which to refuse it on the grounds of overlooking. It's not overlooking in the same way that I'm looking directly at Councillor Folger. It's a distant overlooking.
I'm sorry, the final point about the dimensions is the gap between the building, the proposed building, and the wall itself. Apologies if it's in there, but I couldn't see it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're right, it's not in there, but looking at that drawing, it would strike me as being in the order of between 1 and 1.5 metres.
Thank you. Councillor Karimi.
The plans that we've been, or the presentation that we've been sent seems to be a bit different to the one you've shown us. And also, on this plan here, it says it's 14 metres long, the building. Is that correct, or is it 12.5?
Just in terms of the presentation, I made some amendments to it this morning, as the case officer unfortunately has contracted COVID. So I made some additions to that to try and help to clarify a few matters for you. In terms of the width of the building, sorry, which one, Councillor? Yeah, okay, that's our error, and I apologise for that. Yeah.
Can I also say I would like the wall retained? I don't want that wall damaged at all.
Any further questions for the officer? Yes, Councillor Riley.
I'm seeing the heritage officer's viewpoint here. Conservation area. I'm also used to seeing the term setting. I'm not quite, this isn't coming across clear to me how that building being 1 metre or 1.5 metre to the wall, which I agree with that condition, by the way, and then the height of it in that setting, it doesn't seem to be a clear reference as to why that'd be considered okay. I've seen other applications where, to be honest with you, similar situations, and that word's been used in terms of the setting. So I'm not seeing it in the report, this issue about covering this under, the planning policies in terms of view, vista, setting, and the historical nature of it, and conservation area. I'm not really seeing it here. I'm just seeing really no objections.
That would have been considered as part of the setting, and character is an important consideration. The fact that the word hasn't been used doesn't mean to say that we haven't actually considered that, and it's for members to also consider that. But the impact of the pitched roof in the street scene and its relationship with the wall is considered to be acceptable, and I'm quite happy to confirm that that is then acceptable from an officer's point of view in character and setting terms.
Okay. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Vincent.
Sorry. The other question I have was around the basement swimming pool, which has appeared as an addition to the original application. And forgive me, but I can find no details about the proposed excavations of that basement swimming pool. I don't know if there's anything that could be shared with the committee, and specifically, again, mindful of its proximity to the wall. What provisions are going to be put in place to protect that historic wall as part of excavating that swimming pool? Thank you. Oh, sorry.
In the event of members wishing to approve the application, I think what we would want to see in terms of a condition for a wall is some sort of method statement about what sort of measures are going to be employed to protect that wall. So that could be the construction methods that are going to be used to ensure that sort of the degree of the wall is maintained safely and continues to make the contribution that it has to the character of the area. So it's more about the kind of the construction methods relative to the wall and what protection measures are going to be employed to protect that wall. As yet, we don't have that information because we haven't used the condition to require it to be used. But I think we need to be quite robust about that.
Any further questions for the officer? No, thank you. Then Mr. Candola, if you'd like to take a seat there, please. And you have 5 minutes.
Good
sir.
morning. This is very nerve-wracking. I didn't expect all this. I'm Harry Candola, owner of Catton House. Lived there for 12, nearly 13 years. Lived in Old Catton for 25 years. I've got a large collection of vintage cars and motorcycles, basically scattered around all over the place. So my plan was to build a triple-fronted garage with a games room on top. First location was refused. It's a story and a half, which is just on 6.4 meters. It was then relocated to the bottom end of the garden, which had a big impact on the street view. We then, with a few conversations with Tom, decided that I'd put it along the wall. That way it's kind of covered up and less intrusive. Children have been wanting a swimming pool for quite a while, so we thought while we're doing this dig up, we could do it in the basement. It's going to be 2 meters away from the wall. I can't go any further away from the wall because then it encroaches on the root structure on the yew trees. There was concerns about the yew trees, well, both the trees. So an arboricultural report has been done. Because it was encroaching on one of the zones, the picture where the sleepers were, we did a mini dig by hand just to see what roots were there, and I believe your arboricultural chap was happy with that, that there was no roots there. In terms of protecting the wall, while we do the dig, will be large steel shuttering, so 2 meters away from the wall. You basically dig down a meter, put some shuttering down. You move along the next bit, you go down to 2 meters, you put the shuttering further down, and then to 2.5. Then you go back to the first one, dig that, and then push that down. So it protects the wall. Yes, the last thing I want to do is rebuild that wall. Basically, that's about it. If you have any questions, I mean, we've tried to keep it in keeping with the racket court. So red brick, feather edge boards, and there's only skylights on this side. There were objections from the neighbours saying it would be overlooked, but from their living rooms, all they can see is the shrubs and my 11-foot wall. The only time they would really be able to see it is when they're in the bedrooms and in the wintertime, because from my bedrooms, I can't see them because my trees and their trees block the view. In the winter, obviously, when there's no leaves, they can look into the garden. But it's only we've pulled it down as far as we can towards the bottom end of the garden, but we don't want to go too far because then a street scene. You'll see it as you come up Catton, up Church Street. But if you have any other questions, please ask.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Candola, please? Yes, Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Candola, for your presentation. I've had residents have raised concerns with me. As I haven't given an opinion on them, but I'd just like to share those with the committee. One was a question, what exactly are you using the building for? In the plans, it references a workshop and hoist. And there's concerns about noise associated with that. I understand you've just said that it's for housing your collection of vehicles.
Yeah, on the original building, I had 3 garage doors, and now that was because it was facing the road. Now it's facing the house. Sad it might seem, I like looking at my cars, so I put bifolding doors or glass partition. As for noise, I'm not doing total restorations where you'll be grinding. Most of the vehicles, are in good condition. And the motorbikes were motorbikes I used to race, so they're all, I'm not going to use it for as a workshop as such, which will be 24/7. Yes, there will be bits and pieces going on, hence why on this end where the garage door is, I wanted to put a ramp in. So if I do need to work on the car or cars, I can do. But it is solely for, that is going to be the showroom on the side, garage there, games room upstairs. Downstairs will be the swimming pool. But the way the costs are at the moment, I don't know whether that swimming pool will actually be constructed due to the high costs in building materials.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And may I ask another question?
Yes.
Thank you. We talked about the distance from the wall and the protection, so that's covered that. And you've mentioned about the tree protection, so
Yeah.
that's helpful to, or reassuring to know that that's going to be put in place. But one of the biggest questions or biggest concerns from residents is the sheer scale of that building. And I've just heard that you're unable to move it back, and clearly there's a large concern about the protection of that historic estate wall. I think I heard you to say that you're not able to move it more than 2 meters away because of the tree protection area.
Yeah.
Have you considered of making that building any smaller?
It's the width of it more than anything is the length of a car. So you're talking 6.5 meters, you need clearance. So that's at 7 meters. So it leaves just enough clearance. It was originally 6.5, sorry. It was then changed to 7.5 because of the staircase that will go downstairs into the pool area. We could move it further down and then pull it away from the wall, but then that's going to be more intrusive on your street view. It won't be hidden as much from the bottom yew trees. It'll be closer to the yew trees. The wall goes at a slight angle, so as you come up the road, it will kind of be hidden in the top corner.
Okay. Moment. Thank you.
Helen?
I thought it just might be helpful just to clarify for members the use of the, if you like, ancillary building for the dwelling as described would be something we would look as being as a hobby, and anybody can use their garages for that and put ramps in without consent. So what's been described is acceptable within a residential curtilage. It's what many people do in their garages, so it's not anything other than incidental to the dwelling. Just for clarification from what I've just heard, that's totally what people can do already in their garages.
Councillor Karimi?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a matter of interest, I can't see on here about the type of roof tiles. Will they be similar to the street scene or to your
it
house?
should be on one of them. They're going to be grey, black, grey, dark grey.
So they're
pan
matching
tiles,
with the rest of
Yeah, pan
Okay.
tiles.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chairman, may I also add that there is a proposed planning condition that requires details of the materials to be submitted for us to approve. So.
Okay. Any further questions from councillors to Mr. Candola? No? Thank you, Mr. Candola. If you could turn the microphone off and resume your seat, please. And over to you, councillors. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, perfectly understand the reasoning why the applicant has put this in. Being an ex-semi-professional racing driver many years ago, I totally am in line with your enthusiasm for this car collection, by the way. I did have reservations about this, to be honest, in terms of closeness to the wall, the setting. I see that Old Catton parish have withdrawn now, which I think is quite significant. Whilst I've had those reservations, the officers have answered them. I think on that basis, on balance, just about for me, despite my enthusiasm for the cars anyway, I'll propose that we accept this, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, Councillor Vincent has made some reference to the point, but as you know by the report, that I did request that if the application was approved, it should be called in, which is what followed. Now, I was approached because, as I said, I had attended several of the council meetings and local meetings that have been arranged by the parish council. And at those initial meetings, there really was very serious concern about damage to trees, damage to the wall, and the visual effect in the character as you walked up Church Street. And as I live very close to it, I'm very familiar with that and could understand it. But it was then, and I think the planning department then had taken this up with the owner, as he'd said, and we've had these arboricultural reports, the heritage and the historic, and I've understood that there is satisfaction because at the parish council last Monday, this was discussed again as a result of a letter from the parish, from the planning people to the parish council. And they went over, the councillors, I listened, and they went over it very carefully. And when it went to the vote, as far as I'm concerned, there was a majority, and I think it was unanimous, to now withdraw their problems with the application. I did have, over a period of time, local residents expressing concern as much as anything by just walking up Church Street, because if you noticed, there's a large area of wall where there's a big gap. And as you walk up Church Street, you are looking into the garden. We're looking into it now. And you are going to see some of the building. But as was described, the movement, I've been given to understand, and I listened and read, that the root question is now being, and you described what they were doing, and I think the owner there talked about the steel metals that were going in at the side. So the council members seemed to be convinced that the wall was being protected, but that was a very great concern. And it was the yew tree and the ash tree, wasn't it, that was potentially down, and that has been satisfied by the arboricultural report. And so it was interesting, as has already been mentioned, that the council took a very different view on Monday evening. And as I said, and there's nobody representing the council here, which of course you did give the council a chance, even though it was a little bit short term, because their council meeting was only 2 days before today. So those are the reasons that I was asked to call it in. And I think that, I've heard now that the situation has been investigated, and apparently it satisfied certainly the members of the parish council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Vincent.
Someone else want to go first?
No, I called you. Go.
Thank you, Chairman. And just wanted to pick up on a point that was raised earlier about the conservation officer's comments. And I note in the report it talks about the representations made, but it doesn't specifically mention the objection by the Old Catton Society. And I think it's worthy of noting this because it is within the Old Catton Conservation Area, this development site. And if I may share that with the committee, it says the Old Catton Society object to this revised proposal as before. The erection of a featureless 2-storey wall a few feet back from the boundary of Church Street would result in a particularly intrusive and oppressive feature at this narrow section of the highway. So I just wanted to share that. And furthermore, in the conservation statement, it's quite clear about the importance of these historic walls. It says that Church Street is characterised by high boundary walls and trees which hold together visually a great variety of building types and styles. So just to reinforce that it is a crucial element of the Old Catton Conservation Area. This is one of the most historic streets within that, and I do have reservations about this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Prutton.
My sentiments entirely, Councillor Vincent. I've got it up here, and I was going to say, you've already told us that Old Catton Parish Council have taken away their objections, and I was going to clarify that the Old Catton Society have not. Is that a correct assumption? Yes. And the other thing is, it hasn't been mentioned at all, so I don't think it can possibly be applicable. But is there any intrusion on the skyline of this proposed building when you're in Mr. Repton's park, looking back into the top end of the development?
My recollection of walking around Catton Park is that along the northern boundary, it's quite well treed. So if you are going to see anything, it will be glimpses rather than a.
But not a suddenly a carbuncle on the face of a long loved friend or whatever it was Prince Charles said.
I think if you do see it, I'll swerve that. I think if you do see it, you'll probably see it within the context of other buildings.
Yeah, not intrusive though. No, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, I can come at the end, but I just wanted to clarify another point that we talked about potential conditions, and that is the retention of the wall. And I do think there should be 2 additional conditions, and that is the retention of the wall, so it's there forever and a day, but also the method construction of that basement. I think we do need to have that submitted before commencement starts. So those 2 additional conditions we would just like to confirm we would like added to the recommendation.
Thank you. The proposer and seconder agree to those? Yes. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It might have been helpful if we could have had a computer-generated vision of how this would look from the street. Would make it a lot easier for our deliberations. And I wonder if we might be able to defer the decision to bring that to committee so we can understand exactly how it's going to look, rather than just looking at a line drawing of the proposed development.
Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to, I note your comments on that, but we can't insist that an applicant submits 3-dimensional drawings as part of an application. It's not a validation checklist. I think from my point of view, there is enough information with the photographs and the drawings to be able to assess the impact of the development. But noting that, you know, where possible, they are sometimes submitted, but we can't actually make somebody submit something on those bases when we should be able to assess the impacts from photographs and the drawings that have been submitted. But I do note the benefit of having those, Councillor Brennan.
Anybody else wish to speak before we get to the vote? Councillor Vincent.
I was going to say something similar to Councillor Brennan. I feel that what we have before us, there are a number of gaps, and there are some questions that remain unanswered, particularly in terms of the excavation, the method statement. I know we've just heard that today, but I think it would be extremely beneficial if we could defer this to the point that we have all of that information and consider it all in the round. So I would propose that.
It's proposed and seconded that this application be deferred for further information. Oh yes, yeah. Right, it's already proposed and seconded.
Just to check the drawing. So you've already got a proposal on the table.
Yeah.
The application will be approved.
So we go to that first.
There's an amendment, but you're not amending the proposal.
No, so we take the proposal first. No.
You've got a proposal on the table.
Yeah,
already.
quite right. Okay, well, unless anybody else wants to speak, Councillor Liggett. The amendment is agreed between the proposer and seconder, the protection of the wall and the method of excavation. Yes, that is agreed. That is part of. Okay, so it's proposed by Councillor Riley, seconded by Councillor Adams, that we go with officer's recommendation with those 2 conditions on protecting the wall and the method of excavation for the swimming pool. So all those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Chairman.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, Chairman.
So that is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Next item, 2021-1990, White Horse. Yes, okay, yeah, oh yes, sorry, yes, we've got another presenter, so we'll just hang on for a moment. Okay.
Yes.
Right. 2021-1990, Whitehorse, Chapel Road, Upton. Retrospective permission for erection of outdoor seating pods. So to you, Nigel.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Morning, members, and no members of the public. So I, like Councillor Fisher, need to declare a non-pecuniary interest in that I did sit in these pods some months ago. So taking members to the presentation. Some of you are probably familiar with the Whitehorse Public House, a community pub in Upton. That's just the general location in relation to Upton itself. That's the site area. Public House has a community shop on its northern boundary, fronts Chapel Road at the junction with the Green. Beyond the application site, the road then becomes Marsh Road. You have a property to the north, number 1, also a residential property to the south. There's an existing beer garden to the front of the site, but also a large grassed beer garden to the rear. It does have a vehicular access with parking along the southwestern boundary, leading to a large car parking area to the rear. And as you'll see, the site then backs onto agricultural land. That's the application site. Location of the already constructed pods is on the northern boundary, about a 1.7 metre gap with the boundary to the dividing fence with number 1 Marsh Road to the north. Elevations of the pods, simple timber post structure supporting a polycarbonate sheet roof, internal divisions to give some privacy to the pods. They're open fronted and open to the rear. You'll get clearer views of those from the photographs. 2.6 high to the front, sloping to 2.2 to the rear. Here you can see that degree of separation to the boundary fence. So we're now in the back garden, in the pub, in the rear beer garden. You can see the multiple number of bench seats within the beer garden. The pods themselves fairly well screened at this point, or in camouflaged, I'd say, in terms of their colour. You don't see it very well there, but then when we move around into the pub garden, you now start to see those pods. As I say, they're open fronted, quite simple construction. They were put in last year in relation to COVID-19 and providing outdoor seating area for drinking, eating, etc. And the pub now wish to retain them. Just some closer views of those. They've been constructed on these matting tiles for drainage, permeable surface with shingle in, some internal dividing screens, 1.8 metre high timber, clear polycarbonate sheeting to get daylight through. You can see substantial close board fence on the boundary that measures at 1.9 metres in height. That's the end elevation. These are really just to show the proximity with the neighbouring property to the north. It is a substantial house. It was a rebuild some years ago. It does have windows on ground floor and first floor towards the site. Environmental Services have commented, as you see in the report, it's a pub garden. There will be a degree of noise and activity associated with that, but they don't object to this application. All this does do really is regularize or regiment seating within the location and enable people to sit out there in inclement weather. That's a degree of separation with the boundary. So there is a space in between, a buffer. I'll leave members on that slide. Parish Council support the application. It is retrospective and we're seeking a condition that it simply be retained as constructed, and the recommendation is to approve.
Thank you. Any councillors have questions for the officer? Councillor Karimi.
Just a comment, that gap between the pods and the fence, could we put a condition saying put some planting down there to muffle the noise a bit? So I know there was objection from the neighbour, wasn't there, about noise and cigarette smoke and stuff like that.
I would hesitate to put a condition on about additional planting. I think you've got a fairly robust close bordered fence on that boundary, and that would provide better sound attenuation than vegetation. I would point out as well that there was more vegetation on the neighbour's side, but that has actually recently been removed. But it would create a maintenance issue in terms of that gap, and I don't consider that it's absolutely necessary in terms
Like
of
it
the
might look a bit nicer.
retention.
Looks a bit bare there.
Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairman. I would also have to admit being present at the White Horse on several occasions. When I was chairman, I met Prince Charles there because he sort of opened up the community side of the whole place. So I would be very pleased to propose that we approve this, Chairman.
Seconded.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Fisher.
On the basis that you should always take the benefits of any good pandemic, and I think we're going to find that the various pubs that put pods up for outside seating and just now realise a big benefit. So it does allow one to sit in the garden. Certainly, if you've got a dog or children, and when I visited, there was issues. So I fully support this application, Chairman, and I would just say I understand this is Nigel's last day, and thank him for his presentation and his involvement with Broadland for so many years. I think he was one of the first officers I met when I first got elected in '89 about a particular planning application in Thorpe, and he's been my mentor and my history of any planning application in Thorpe and the benefits of that. So I'm sorry to see him go, but I wish him luck.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll come to Nigel's leaving at the end. Right, did anybody else wish to speak on the application?
Sorry, not the application.
No. Yeah. Okay. Right. So it's proposed by Councillor Leggett, seconded by Councillor Adams, that we go with the officer's recommendation for approval. All in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Yeah. Could somebody ask Councillor Brennan to come back? Nigel, you were doing the.
I'll just run through the appeals.
The appeals. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So just a summary, which we bring to you on a monthly basis in terms of any appeal decisions received and also any newly received appeals against decisions of the council. So on page 50, the first one there, 2021-0182 Redbourne House. That was an officer's delegated decision to refuse planning permission for some dwellings. Partly inside the settlement limits, but the majority of the site outside of the settlement limit in Caldershall. You'll see the appeal was dismissed. The two key issues for the inspector: that the appeal site would not be a suitable location for the proposed development, having regard to the development strategy, and it was very much contrary to DM policy GC2. And also that the proposal would cause unacceptable harm to the character and appearance of the area, so contrary to policies JCS2 and also DM policy EN2 as well, in terms of character and appearance. You've then got a list of 4 new appeals received. The first one at Birmingham, that was an officer's delegated refusal of a dwelling outside the settlement limit. That's a written reps appeal that's been made. 2021-1717 land at Dawson's Lane. Members will recall that item came before members for consideration a few months ago now, regarding the verification report for the surface water drainage. Members deferred consideration of the item and wanted the verification report to be submitted after a further 12-month period, so it didn't determine the application. Well, the applicant has appealed non-determination, so that's going forward on the basis of a written reps appeal, as are the other 2. The one at Mansell Drive, Old Catton, which was a backland plot for a dwelling, again, officers delegated refusal, and a site outside of any settlement limit at Western Longville for a dwelling, and again, that's a written reps appeal. And that's it in relation to the appeal summary, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on the appeals? No. Thank you. Well, that concludes the official business today. I'd just like to say for Nigel, after 37 years. He must have started here about 4 years old, I think. And thank you very much. As chairman, I'd like to thank you very much for everything you've done over the years, and personally for all the applications you've gone through with me over the years. And we wish you all the very best, Great Yarmouth Borough Council.
Yeah, Nigel, could I just say as well, I've known you from before I was a councillor when we had discussions about various plan applications, some to do with RF culture before I was even a councillor. So we'd already established quite a repertoire, shall we say. Yeah, you've been here a long time, Nigel. And I think it's not only that you've been here a long time, it's your experience, gravitas in terms of what you do, which has always been much appreciated. And it's definitely our loss and Yarmouth's gain.
No, let's go on, Mike. Thank you. No, thanks for those kind words. No, I came here 1985. I left school and I had various routes that I was going to take down, but rightly or wrongly, I arrived here as a youth opportunities trainee, and then got my first job in December '85. I've had numerous jobs since, but I think it's under David Parr, the Director of Technical Services at the time. Ended up as a planning technician. The council were good enough to put me through further education, so I did 6 years postgrad or BA on some postgrad at South Bank Uni, and it's helped me. It's helped the organisation, so we've helped each other. Libby were two good ways forward, and that's that the building you're heading to as a new HQ is a very good decision to go there. And I was the case officer that dealt with the planning application. So when you go in there, you can think of me.
Yeah. It all goes wrong. You know whose fault it'll be.
Oh no, the building still stands, so we did something right.
And if I can just concur with that, on behalf of the officers and myself, that we will greatly miss Nigel. He is irreplaceable. His knowledge, his approach to his work has been exemplar. So I've also known Nigel for 36 years. We started along the same route. So I've known Nigel through our City College days and our South Bank University days. So we've had that same journey. So, I shall miss personally Nigel immensely, but do wish him well for the future. And we've got time to say goodbye to him tomorrow. His last day in the office is tomorrow before he goes on leave, but we do wish him well.
I've living in the district that I'm dealing with. What I've dealt with. Okay. Thank you,
everybody.
Oh yes.